My name is Andria Kroner. I am a PhD student at Binghamton University, but like Henry, I am also associated with the University of Washington's RABEP program. I'm going to tell you today about some preliminary results from an acoustic study with crows that I started last summer. So in the background, as you heard Henry discuss earlier, there have been some changes in the distribution of crows throughout the years. And I had begun wondering how these changes in densities of crows across the island and the potential loss of connectivity between different sides of the island, how that might have changed their ability to communicate or changed patterns in their communication across the island. This can have important impacts on their ability to find mates, to find new habitat. If there are no crows calling in an area that was or that is suitable habitat, dispersing crows might not be attracted to that area. They might not recognize it as suitable habitat, and therefore affect the settlement decisions of crows. In addition to impacts on the effects of lack of connectivity between habitats. It also impacts our ability to locate and monitor pair activity. If pairs are, it's possible that in low density areas, pairs might be communicating more, trying to find neighbors and find social interactions, or they might be vocalizing less. Pairs might have fewer territorial disputes if they have fewer neighbors to defend their territories against. So what I did in July of 2016, I used automatic recorders that I set up at 14 different territories across the island, and these were territories known to be active during that previous breeding season as either having a territorial pair or they had fledged young. These recorders automatically recorded from sunrise to sunset, and they were set out in these territories for a week at a time. In analyzing this data, it's a little bit complicated. I used a new software program produced by Wildlife Acoustics, who also made the recorders that I used. And this software has a function where it clusters detections into, it groups acoustic detections into clusters where individual detections that are most similar are grouped together, and the most similar ones have the lowest distance to the center of this cluster, and ones that are less similar are grouped further away, and it's given a score of 0 to 1. These similar clusters are then placed adjacent to each other, and as you review them, you can see that usually similar species or similar sounding detections are grouped together. So this software also has the ability you can train it to find vocalizations or sounds that are of particular interest, such as a species like the aga. So I took an hour of, in order to train this software, I took an hour of recordings from each of my sites to give it a good range of potential sounds that it could encounter. And I let the program cluster it. I went through all of these clusters, which is about 150, 200 clusters, and I told it what each of these clusters were. I broadly defined it as either Mariana crow or not Mariana crow. And so these two So these are two examples of detections that the program comes up with out of my recordings. Oh. Oh, it might not work. It's okay. But basically this top... turn the volume up. So this is a Mariana crow, one of the detections of a Mariana crow, and so I would have identified that as Mariana crow, obviously. And this is is another detection that, that I would be training it against. And that is a solly. So again, I define these things as Mariana Crow or not Mariana Crow, and then I ran all of my recordings, which was about 1,300 hours or 400 gigabytes of sound. It took a while, and I let it automatically ID the Mariana Crows. As you can expect, there are going to be some false positives in there, and so I went through all of the detection. I went through groups of detections at different distances from center and calculated the error rate, and I accepted all the detections that for my analyses that were at 0.5 distance from center. So in the false positives, I identified the sollies as being the most common false positive. They made up about half of all of the false positives, but also included were the black drongos, feral chickens, some seabirds, and also the kingfisher came up in there. At the closest distance, the error rate was about 5%, and at 0.5, which was the cutoff that I used, the error rate was about 25%. So some of the things I found in these preliminary results were trying to see if these the recordings support some of our anecdotal observations of crow vocal behavior. Similar to other birds, it seems that they are more active in vocalizing in the morning hours. So this graph is showing for each color, we have the percent of percent of detections at a site in a given hour, where all of the colors across the day, or all of the percents across the day equal 100% for each site. And then each bar represents an hour of the day and the sum of all the percents of all of the different sites. So as you can see, 6 a.m. is a pretty prime time for detecting crows. And it is at its lowest at noon. Nobody really likes to be out there and talking much when it's that hot. And it improves a little bit towards the end of the day. What's pretty interesting about this is that the 5 a.m. hour in the middle of the summer, sunrise is only as early as 5:50. These recorders are only starting to record at sunrise. So there's only a 10-minute period in which all of those detections are happening. Conversely, the 1800 hour, so 6 p.m., sunset is around 6:50 p.m. during this time of year. So they have 50 minutes to be vocalizing or to potentially be detected, and yet there are almost no detections during the 1800 hour. So it really drops off quite drastically from the 5 p.m. hour to the 6 p.m. hour. The detections per day, so as I said, these recorders were at each site for a whole week, and I wanted to understand how there might be variation between different sites and within sites, and it turns out that they are really variable in how many detections we're getting on a given day. So we have two different sites shown here. Duty is the one on top, and it's showing up to 40 detections in a single day, and as low as fewer than 5 detections on its lowest day, whereas the what we call Upper Logwan is a site that was close to a nest, and therefore it was really consistent. It had a large nestling that was vocalizing a lot. It had almost 1,600 detections on its highest day, and only as over 800 as its lowest. So there's a lot of variation both within a site, such as the Duty one, and in between sites where we might have Duty had a mobile family group that was moving around. They didn't have a specific location that they were really keyed in on. But it also can be due to weather on different days, really rainy days, you'll be less likely to detect them, and also and just sort of the luck of picking a good spot to put these recorders, especially if the pair doesn't have a nest to focus in on. Another question I wanted to ask was whether family groups, so pairs that have dependent young still, are these more easily detected? Sort of anecdotally, as field biologists following the aga around, we kind of perceive family groups as being noisier. The kids tend to seem to be vocalizing more with their parents, but does that come out in actual ability to detect the crows from one day to the next? And using a non-parametric test, I looked at that with my data here, and it appears that they're not necessarily more easily detected. This was a small sample size. There was a lot of variation. We have the one nest that's shown up there as a big outlier with all of its detections, but there really was no true significant difference between pairs that had dependent young and pairs without dependent young. In summary, I believe that these recorders and this software is a really effective tool that generally supports our anecdotal field observations. It can further inform our surveying effort and has the potential to reduce human effort, especially in areas that have inconsistent occupancy. We spend a lot of time going out there and looking for crows, and as I showed with the variability from one day to the next, you might spend hours out there and not find anybody, but that does not mean that there are no crows occupying that area. And I can have the ability to further fine-tune the automatic ID portion of the software and better train the software to pull out more specific vocalization patterns, patterns with co-occurrence with different species. There's a whole host of things that one can pull out. It's almost a little daunting seeing these 400 gigabytes of data and more that I'm still collecting and thinking about all the different questions that I can possibly ask with it. So in the future, some of the questions that I am hoping to address include what I spoke with in the beginning with changes in how pair density and connectivity might be affecting how the crows communicate with each other. And then also, as it mentioned with this new captive rearing program, how might captive rearing be affecting the vocal development of young aga? And I'm planning to compare how these captive reared birds vocalize in comparison to wild reared aga. With that, thank you, and take any questions.
Yeah, really interesting. What I'm kind of curious about actually turning one of your future directions on its head in terms of looking at the relationship between density and behavior. Do you think that if in an area where there is more vocalization frequency or more variation in vocalization types or something, that could be used as a tool for like content-specific attraction to draw birds into those areas that might be more suitable for breeding habitat?
Absolutely. That is something that was certainly in my mind of trying to figure out if there is a difference in how they're communicating and like you said, turning it on its head and seeing if we can use that as a tool in the future for drawing birds in. But yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to give me a hypothetical answer. I just found out that the aga became more warm. And just like humans, in order to encourage or enhance their viability, they must have a voice. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me what voice the aga is trying to express that we're not hearing, that we've eradicated them here?
Yeah. That is a very It's a good question, but a tough question. It's really hard to say. Birds communicate in so many ways, and it's possible that interactions between species, such as the Solly that is still left here, and other birds that are unfortunately gone, has changed some of the acoustic environment, and you know, it's really hard to say. Different birds pick up on alarm calls from each other. They I wouldn't necessarily say work together, but they eavesdrop on each other, and so there certainly could be impacts of losing some of the acoustics. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there historic recordings of the aga from Guam that are usable for comparing?
There are a few of the resources that I've looked into, which includes the Macaulay Library, is the only one that I've seen recordings from Guam. Those were from, I believe, in the 70s. I've listened to some, but there's probably only about 20 recordings, and I think all of them are from Douglas Pratt. But yeah, those are, anybody can listen to them at the Macaulay Library through Cornell University.
Mm-hmm. Do you hear any birds get got by cats?
No, not specifically. But there is the potential for, if these are put up at nests, for finding unique events like that. It's just a matter of whether you want to run 24 hours a day or just during the times that you're interested in hearing vocalizations, and then spending the time looking for these really rare events.
Well, thank you all. I think it's time for some coffee. We'll take a 15